One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's live edition. It is August 26, 2012. And it is an interesting day, let me tell you. I've been tracking this storm. As many of you know, I'm based right now out of South Florida. And this tropical storm, Issac, I think it's called, is coming by us as we speak. We're being drenched with rain and a little bit of wind, but not too much. And you could see that a lot of the hype about it hitting Tampa and St. Pete and causing all sorts of untold damage, as I said the other day when I was talking about this, was overblown. And now the tracks show that it's probably going to go out into the center of the Gulf and hit somewhere in the northern Gulf Coast as either a Category 2, perhaps a Category 3. Now, that's just by estimation. It all depends on how strong the storm grows. Now, unfortunately, in case some of you don't understand, you don't live in hurricane country where I do. This is normal occurrence for us, so it's amazing because the people in South Florida are like, okay, no one's really flipping out down here. This is par for the course. Most people by now are prepared for it unless they've never been to. The only people that flip out are the new transplants from outside that have never been through a storm. For the most part, people understand tropical storms and hurricanes and stuff down here. But when these storms hit the Gulf of Mexico, they gain a lot of strength because of the warm water. So yeah, it could, the storm could grow bigger and larger and more powerful. But today I'm going to be showing how they could actually tear the thing apart and stop it. And that they know they could do this, and they've known since the 60s that they could do this, and they don't. Now, you'll hear one reason for why they don't do it, but I'm sure there's a multitude of reasons, especially now. It has been 40-something years. I'm sure there's other benefits to not doing it, with Katrina, allowing that storm to hit New Orleans and not even allowing it to hit. What if they, bounced it like a pinball using high-pressure domes, which I've talked about already on multiple occasions. And it would be, to create these domes, they use HAARP in conjunction with spraying aerosols into the sky, i.e. aluminum and barium and strontium, and they heat up the aluminum particles, the metal particles help heat up the atmosphere, the surrounding atmosphere, and it expands, pushing up, creating a dome, and with this high pressure dome, then it's already been shown that you could bounce a hurricane and steer it. If you create a couple of these high pressure domes in the right spot, you could bounce a hurricane like a pinball hitting a pinball bumper in a pinball machine. It's that simple. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to let you hear the audio evidence. I've already showed you how they could steer hurricanes. Today I'm going to show you the proof, let you hear it from one of the man himself who was one of the first people to see the cloud, okay? And you're going to hear him say some interesting things. You're going to hear him say that, yeah, they could do this. They can stop the hurricanes from being as strong as they are, and they know how to seed them on the horizontal, as you'll hear him say, and literally cause the top end of the hurricane to expand and just rip the hurricane apart. Okay, so I've talked about this before. I'm going to play the audio again because this backs up, this dovetails in with what Mike Murphy talks about in his movie, What and Why, the second one, Why in the World Are They Spraying? And I've been talking about geoengineering and weather modification lately to pound the point home because this is a very important issue. And watching this hurricane's path and watching how they hype it and knowing that they could steer a storm or tear a storm apart, and they're freaking everybody out, pushing out that fear vibe. I want to show you the proof when I say that they could tear a storm apart. So I'm going to play you a little bit of audio. I don't want to hear anybody bitching and moaning. Yes, the audio came from one of Alex Jones's interviews with this guy. You know what? Too bad. If you don't like him, that's your personal issue, but listen to the information. We don't have time for that kind of garbage. It's important to listen to what Ben Livingston, the person that's being interviewed, has to say. Right? It's very important, and I will point out exactly one of the most important red flags in the video, by the way, or the audio you're going to hear, is he talks about Hurricane Hunter aircraft and how they were, the Hurricane Hunter squadron were the ones that were seeding the clouds. And you hear all the time the weathermen, when talking about hurricanes or tropical storms, you hear them talking about the Hurricane Hunter aircraft going in there and keeping an eye on the storm. Well, what else are they doing? Are they feeding it? Are they helping direct it? And why, the biggest question, why aren't they trying to stop it farther out at sea where they know they can? A lot of people don't like to talk about weather modification. This and chemtrails seem to be a big thing. People it seems too far out there, but the fact is it's real. So you're going to hear this interview with this guy. His name's Ben Livingston. I've referenced him before on air. I've talked about him, and I want you to hear some of the audio from this interview. So on the other side, because we have a break coming up in a few minutes, so on the other side of the break, I'll get into that. And in hour two, I have an interview with a guy who's a former Nazi, former Hitler Youth, I should say. And I've been actually wanting to play this for about 2 months, but I've been so busy and all the stuff that's been going on. The things happen so much that sometimes I have to put things on the side to talk about other issues, and I've had a lot of guests on, and, I have a bunch of guests scheduled for the next, couple shows. So today, since I have the time, I want to be able to play on the second hour. I'm going to play this for you. The former Hitler Youth, and you're not going to get the whole interview. You can see the full interview over on Federal Jack Tube 4. That's one of my YouTube channels, which recently just got full-length upload privileges back. So I've been slowly putting some good stuff up there in full-length format. So go over, check it out, Federal Jack Tube, and then the number 4, all one word. And just look in the videos, look for former Hitler Youth whistleblower warns of America's Nazi future. And I will, I'll drop the link in the chat room. And no, I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to create this division where I think it's, hidden Nazis that are secretly taking over. The reason I want to play it is because if you listen to this interview, it's very telling because he's explaining from what he witnessed himself how how Germany went from being, this free, open society with the Weimar Republic to being this clamped down police state, i.e. Nazi Germany. So when you listen to this interview, it's very telling because a lot of the things that he said that the people 60, 70 years ago, 80 years ago did, we are repeating these same exact mistakes in this country. So no, I'm not trying to say when I play the clip that I think, hidden Nazis, in a UFO base somewhere are coming back or traveling, back through time to take things over. It's none of that garbage. And who knows, I'm not saying that those theories are crap. I'm just saying it's none of that. I want you to listen to this interview, second hour, because it's amazing how it just mirrors today what this guy went through back then. And I think it'd be a big wake-up call for people to hear. So stay tuned. We'll be back. Don't go anywhere. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to play this clip with Ben Livingston really quick, but I want to give you an RNC update. Got a few people I know up there. Even one of the Federal Jack crew is up there keeping an eye on things, checking things out. And right now he's at the Ron Paul rally where I guess the official campaign thing that they're putting together, not Paul Fest. And I wanted to bring this up really quick. Apparently, I don't know if it was yesterday or at least yesterday, perhaps even the day before, the Ron Paul campaign was handing out I guess an informational packet to people that were going there. And in it was a color photo of Adam Kokesh with the words "not allowed" above his head. And then, of course, they took a video still from one of his videos, and they choose, they always choose like the worst position, because in a video they can get a still shot like maybe where one eye is closed or something, and they'll take that frame out, and then of course they dick with it in Photoshop. So they made Adam look horrible in the photo, and it says this man's not allowed into the Sun Dome or after party. If you see him, immediately call USF police, and it also some guy, I guess the head of Ron Paul security, and it gives out both phone numbers. And it doesn't matter whether or not you think Kokesh goes overboard with some of the things he does or his antics. It doesn't matter. It's just the point is, it goes to show you that the Ron Paul campaign, and I'm not bashing Paul himself, but the people that have taken over, like his grandson-in-law, Jesse Benton, and the rest of the team over there, has obviously steered this thing right into the crapper. And, with his son, bloviating and pretty much blowing Mitt Romney on air. I went there. And, then going after Abby Martin and her job and the people at RT and having them threatened because Abby had the balls in her off time with Luke Radowski to go up there and actually ask him a question. When they interviewed him the last time, and it was all, sun and fun because, hey, we love you, Rand, and Rand will give you his time, and, Rand's a people's man. But after his true colors are shown and he's asked a question, and I played the audio on my show, and when I also covered for Tom Donahue, I played the audio of Abby getting hassled and what she went through. So it's no secret. This guy's not a savior. Making deals with the devil is not going to save anything. I've said before, first of all, if anything, this is an example of why we need to take care of things ourselves. Again, personal accountability. I'll hammer this point home. This is why we need to take care of things ourselves. And I agree when Kokesh says that you don't need, when he attacks statists and he says, well, we don't really need a government, to fix roads, do we? No, he's right, we don't. It's already been proven time and time again that actual private citizens who use the roads are more apt to do it correctly and fix it and do it more efficiently than a government. I mean, how many of you out there, I know in the town I grew up in, they did this, it took us years to get the town to pave the roads because there was certain sections of this main drag through town that was just horrible, and there was certain roads that needed to be repaved, and it was going to be somewhat expensive. And rather than actually go and figure out, well, do we need to replace the plumbing or the sewer pipes or anything underneath, they repaved first, and then 6 months later said we have to fix the storm sewers. We have to put in, new drain pipes and everything, bigger ones, because the town had a flooding problem when it during the spring and into the summer. So they rather than maybe think about this 6 months ahead of time, right? and tear the roads up, replace all the drain pipes, and then because you've torn the road up, then after you do all this work, you go and pave the road. Well, doesn't that sound like something that would be, intelligent, right? That's how you would want to do it, right? Well, no. And I know many city governments that have done this, where they go and they pave a road, and then a couple months later they rip the road up because they have to do some sort of repair underneath. Instead of, while you're tearing the road up, if you know it's been a while, they knew that in the town that I grew up, in that case, they knew long before they paved the roads that they were going to have to replace those pipes. So you would think that common sense would dictate that, hey, while you're tearing the road up, you might as well dig it. Well, they couldn't get the contractors. I guess they couldn't. It was some sort of planning thing, or just typical government bureaucratic retardation. Okay, so if you had left it up to the private citizens, it would have gotten done more efficiently. And after they tore the road up, the newly paved road, they wouldn't pay to have the whole road repaved again. So they patched it, and so you only had a nice paved road for like 6 months, and then you had Lower Beirut again. And where I grew up was up in North Jersey, so first time winter comes around, and you get the town dumping 15,000, 20,000 pounds of salt on the roads all over the place. And then you get the ice melting and then refreezing and then melting because they put more salt on it and then refreezing. That creates expansions, little expansion joints, if you will. So then the patch starts to have like a 1 or 2 inch, little diameter outline around it, almost like a border. And then it starts to sink because now water's getting underneath it and undermining it. Yeah, and then you have big potholes, and then it wrecks your car. You see? Government retardation. Okay? So I agree with him on his, the fact that you don't need government per se. You do need some sort of structure. I don't think that, people should be running around unstructured, because no structure at all, then things don't work well. But in that structure, one does not need government. And I know this is hard for people to accept, but the word government actually comes from 2 words, verb and a noun. Latin, means to control the mind. Okay? Mark and I talked about this on Friday. I've talked about this many times. Different shows I've been on as a guest. We don't need government per se. Do you really need somebody in your town to tell you, to mow your lawn? If you do, and people will say, well, Popeye, there's my next door neighbor's a putz. He doesn't mow his lawn. Okay, well, that's personal accountability. Again, if he was personally accountable for his own actions, he would mow the lawn because he wouldn't want to have 6-foot-high grass, snakes, and bugs and everything else. But people have become dumbed down and lazy and ignorant. And it's too hard and too scary to face that stuff. So it's easier to live in this perpetual state of, it's easier for me to allow someone else to govern for me. You know what, honestly? Ron Paul's not going to save you. Rand Paul will never save you. None of them will. You know what will save you? You embracing the ideas that he put forth and running with it. Embracing freedom, not giving in. That's what Ron Paul is good for. But people think that he would be some sort of savior and come in. No politician can. Even if he won and got in as, he got nominated and everybody voted for him and he got in, right? Which, that would be cool, right? Let's say he gets in. He wouldn't land on the lawn in January with a cape and a leotard and everything would, poof, go away. It would still require the people to take personal accountability. Stop looking to an outside force or agency or whatever you want to call it for guidance and for protection. Look to yourself. Solve your own problems. You would be amazed how things would turn around. And I'm not bashing anybody for voting or anything like that. I kind of got off on a tangent. I was just trying to give an RNC update. So yeah, Kokesh is banned. Just thought you guys would find that interesting. When we get back, I'm going to play I'm going to play some of the audio from this interview with Ben Livingston for you. I've already got it all queued up. But see, things like that get me fired up because I understand we need to evolve as humanity. And I'm trying to push that evolution as hard as I can. We're going to break. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. All right. I'm going to play this clip interview with Ben Livingston. And this guy, remember, as I said, he was the first guy to seed a cloud for the purpose of military use against an enemy. They were seeding clouds over the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They dropped more ordnance on the Ho Chi Minh Trail than they had during all of World War II. I mean, they bombed the hell out of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and they still couldn't shut it down. So they used weather, and what they couldn't do with B-52s and F-4 Phantoms and everything else, they accomplished with Mother Nature within a couple days, and they flooded out the whole area, this whole section of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, took out bridges, took out a bunch of stuff. And again, this is all fact. So check out, this is Ben Livingston, and I picked it up. You're going to hear him talking about, as soon as we come in, you're going to hear him talk about how they could, you're going to hear him say that you could fly into the hurricane, you could fly into the storm, and you'll hear him say with clouds like Carla or Rita, and he's talking about Hurricane Carla and Hurricane Rita, they could fly in and project the silver iodide, these flares that this delivery system via these flares that they have, and they would fire them off into the cloud at certain intervals at a certain level, and doing this, it would cause the top of the hurricane to grow and the storm, the clouds to grow upward, and it would tear the storm apart. Now, that's where it's going to start off. You're going to hear him say this. So I want you to think about that, about all the times that all these storms have hit in the past 10 years especially, and we always get a lot of hurricanes, but with cable news, it's 24/7 in your face. And Katrina, the storm that's going on now, think about that. They could stop this stuff. You're going to hear him get right into that. Listen.
In Carla or Rita, those kind of clouds, we would maybe use, this is one cloud seeding device here, cut into 5 pieces. But in one like this, you may be flying 350 miles an hour, kicking one out every 200 or 300 meters, and just essentially seed the whole area on the horizontal, and the whole top would blow away.
Amazing. We were the first ones to fly into hurricanes for the purpose of modifying them, if you will. That was Project Storm Fury. I began to be extremely confident that we could do about what we wanted to with a hurricane. The Project Storm Fury had been going on since 1961, and they had already done 2 experiments, one in 61 and 63. Well, by 1964, when I was there in 1964, I wrote the plan and started to have a track and a mission for every flight that was on the hurricane cloud seeding experiments. So we had documentation for everything. Operation and Project Storm Fury are very positive. This report said that we claim they should consider now if a hurricane heads straight towards Miami. Some wanted to continue hurricane reductions, and the other part did not want to. It was a political football, and there are people that were wanting to do more pure research and less application engineering wanted to kill Project Storm Fury. So they built up an artificial barrier that prevented hurricanes from ever qualifying to be experimented or seeded for damage reduction. NOAA research people came up with data that suggested that if a hurricane went through a certain little geographical area, there was no history in 100 years that a hurricane had been through that area ever reached land. So they made a requirement that the storm must go through this area of, I call it an area of improbability, before it would qualify for hurricane damage reduction attention. So after about 10 years, no hurricanes went through there, and the people, that is the scientists who didn't want to spend money on aircraft reconnaissance, decided, well, it's just too expensive, we can't wait any longer, so they killed the project altogether. I am terribly disappointed that the government have decided a long time ago not to do the hurricane damage reduction anymore. They can talk about the scientifically rigorous data the inability of civilian aircraft and so forth to collect this data and poo-poo the empirical, or then say the observation that you make just by looking out the window or watching your instruments, saying it has no value. In order to change the weather and know that you're changing it, you must have instrumentation or document it. So my line of business really was to design and make equipment that would document changes in the weather. You take a cloud that Mother Nature or God has provided, and you alter that cloud. Well, the reason the cloud doesn't expand on its own in most cases is the fact that there's a lot of moisture, but there's no nuclei. There's nothing for the moisture to stick to. So when you provide the silver iodide nuclei, it causes the water to coalesce to that nuclei.
I'm going to pause it there for a second. Remember when Mike talked about the chemtrails on the multiple times he's been on my show, other radio programs, and in the movie, Why in the World Are They Spraying? And the other people too, like Scott Stevens, they're talking about the fact that these chemtrails are keeping this huge river of water up in the sky because all of this moisture is adhering to it, the aluminum particles and such, and not dropping down. It's acting as a nuclei, and this is exactly, so it's almost like a tweak of seeding clouds. Once you understand the basic science, you keep working at it, and it's amazing what you'll figure out. And this is over 40 years ago. Remember that. This is not, crazy science fiction. This is reality. If you think that we can't control the weather, then you're sorely mistaken.
And when it does, it releases heat, which means everything starts to rise. If you produce enough nuclei at the right places in a cloud, there's essentially no limit to how fast and how far it'll grow, because it just keeps releasing heat as it goes up. And of course, the heat keeps trying to rise.
So with the nuclei, it's very small, and they're put off by these flares, but then water starts attracting to it, and then it builds condensation.
Well, you put out a G into these, silver iodide nuclei, and they attract water. They just sponge it up. Well, when they do, that water condenses and it releases what they call the latent heat of condensation. The heat goes out of it, and the whole thing starts rising. If you're in the business of trying to kill clouds, then of course you go up to the area where there are some vertical shear, the wind blowing some direction or other, and you provide the nuclei at a level above where the raindrops are. They're then so light that the wind, vertical shear, merely blows the top of the cloud away. Then there's no place for the coalescence or the nucleation to take place. Well, the Joint Chiefs of Staff had been wishing for quite some time, in terms of years, that they had some way of slowing the truck down in Vietnam. That led me to advise the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
And this is where he gets into about using the weather as a military weapon in Vietnam, like I was talking about.
That we had a potential weapon system, and so I was asked to start to put together a top secret operation to go to Vietnam to see if we couldn't make it rain more over there as a military operation. All the roads over there were dirt roads, and when it rained, it caused them a lot of problems. So that during the monsoon season, there was so much rain and water in the roads that the trucks really couldn't move very freely. Our mission was to make it rain during the dry season. On that particular day, the clouds were very small. There just weren't any real big thunderstorms or anything like that. But I picked a cloud that was sitting out essentially by itself with a number of small clouds. I'm talking about clouds whose tops were somewhere near the freezing level, but not high enough to really grow. And I nurtured one of those clouds until it finally got it in.
All right, I'm going to stop it right there. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back and more with Ben Livingston.
Well past the freezing level, and then the cloud developed a lot of convective activity, and it started sucking clouds into it. It just building up, and I took a series of pictures what I called for 41 minutes. By the end of 41 minutes, we had flown up to over 65,000 feet, and we still couldn't reach the top of the cloud. So we knew we had a barn burner there. And by the next morning, we had washed out everything in the world and did a lot of damage to people and all that sort of thing. But it was a real success as far as blocking the roads off. With just two of us involved, myself and a civilian, but we conducted that operation with military aircraft, mostly from Marine Corps, and then shortly thereafter we started involving the U.S. Air Force. Well, we actually began the 3rd or 4th of September, and by the 13th of October, we had a couple of storms that had actually washed out bridges, and the results were so successful until I was called down to Saigon to brief the generals, the Air Force generals, the Army generals down there, and they suggested that I need to go make this report to President Johnson back in Washington, D.C. They were excited about it, but they had no authorization, if you will, to use this as a military weapon system. I was there in very top secret classification as a research project. That's why we were able to conduct the mission without the international community, if you will, being apprised of what we were doing and how we were doing it. It was kept top secret for a long time. It was first reported that this was going on in 1972. That's the first time the Congress ever heard about it. So as you can see, it was not something everyone knew about for a long time.
It must feel good, though. I mean, you're the father of something. You used weather weapons first.
Well, it's okay.
And for all we know, is that the only time they've been used?
Well, that same project went on through 1972 when we got out of Vietnam. But the Air Force was still doing it.
But was it only used in Vietnam, never anywhere else?
No, it's the only place ever. We've had no requirement for anywhere else that I can think of. But it could be used anywhere with
Did you ever do any testing in the U.S.?
Did I? Oh, yeah, a lot, yeah.
You were the head of what base? You were the head of acting commander of what base?
I was the acting commanding officer at the Corona Naval Weapons Research Center.
And they worked on a lot more there than just weather weapons, didn't they?
Yes, they do. But my main contribution at Corona was to write a plan for weather modification control for the whole world at any given time. We could send a number of airplanes with the materials and dispensing equipment we had, and probably control the weather all the way around the world.
Why? Because you said it's on seven major front lines.
Well, there are only from 5 to 7 major troughs around the world at any given time, and they undulate just like ocean waves, move back and forth and back and forth. And at any time, there's a front associated with those where all the thunderstorms are located. And with having a few airplanes, a couple of airplanes at the right place, you could run down that line of thunderstorms and do whatever you wanted to with them.
Did you just hear what he said? It's not that hard to control the weather. It's not as hard as one would think to do this. And this, again, they were playing with this back in the 60s. So imagine what they've got now, 40, 50 years later. Just imagine what they've got.
This is out of the June 1974 Science magazine. And this article was actually written in it says it's written in 1970.
And it's titled Weather Warfare, the article he's talking about. It's titled Weather Warfare. Pentagon concedes 7-year Vietnam effort. And this was in the early 70s.
Yeah, it was, 1974. And this is when the Senate got wind that something had been going on in Vietnam that they didn't know about. And they wanted to know about it. Well, it's interesting to note that this project ended in 1972. It started in 1966. So you can see the secrecy.
Senator Pale was a kind of aggressive senator about people doing things that the Senate didn't know about. He got wind of it, and he asked for a briefing. And a Colonel Sasser, I believe his name was, may have been something else, but a colonel, Air Force colonel, gave them a briefing, gave his committee a briefing, and told them it had been going on since in a research configuration from 1966 to the present time. President Johnson was very mild. It turned out that he had known my father. So we had a little old homecoming there for just a few minutes. And then he asked me what I was doing and told me he had read and been briefed on what we were doing and how we were doing it. And he asked me my opinion of it and asked if I thought that we could continue that. I said, well, I see no reason why we can't continue it, because we'll have the same kind of weather coming up again in March of next year, and we can seed and make rain right into the monsoon system. And we can then extend the monsoon system well past this August end to maybe the first week in November. He didn't say a whole lot about it, except he thought it was he thought it was real weird, if you will, that people could take a little weather modification and change the whole climate of the country. When I came back to the States, where I had time to do something as far as weather modification was concerned, I went back to my duties, if you will, as being the military member of the Project Storm Fury Advisory Committee.
Without getting anything classified, can you tell us about some of the tests you did in China Lake?
Well, of course, in China Lake, we had different manufacturers of these cloud seeding devices. We had different yields for them. We had different burn times on how fast we wanted to put all this nuclei out. And so we tested all those things in China Lake. We'd pick a cloud out in the middle of the desert out there. We had 100 miles test range out there that belonged to the Weapons Center. And we'd just pick a thunderstorm and go do what we wanted to with it. By 1969, we had all of the latest state-of-the-art equipment in a number of airplanes, and we also had aircraft equipped with dispensing equipment to put silver iodide into a hurricane. The hypothesis for how to do this had been designed, developed by Dr. Joanne Simpson, and her husband, Dr. Robert Simpson, was the director of Project Storm Fury for a number of years. And we followed her hypothesis, which said that if you seed enough clouds in the right front quadrant of a hurricane where the energy cells are, you may build a second eye, or at the minimum make this original eye much bigger, which meant you have a reduction in wind velocity.
Tell us again, Mr. Livingston, Ben, just exactly who Mr. Simpson is.
Dr. Simpson, at the time Project Storm Fury started, he was the head of the United States Weather Bureau. With the funds being made available for Project Storm Fury, they created a new department or new entity of government called the National Hurricane Research Center. And Dr. Simpson, Dr. Bob Simpson, was the director of that group.
So he's preeminent.
He is preeminent. And his wife, Joanne, I attended a ceremony for her induction into the National Center for Atmospheric Research Laboratory Wall of Fame last summer, in which her name was placed on the wall as one of the 5 preeminent scientists in the nation in the 20th century. That's his wife, Joanne, who was the head of Project Storm Fury for the 2 years. I worked with her for those 2 years.
And they're saying right here that this is conclusive.
Yes.
So why aren't we saving people hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of lives? This needs to be implemented.
This book, Hurricane Watch here, is very important because it's written by a person who's a former director of the National Hurricane Center. So he's had worlds of experience in the research in these things. And I might add that I took Dr. Bob Sheets on his first airplane ride into a hurricane in 1964.
The book's called Hurricane Watch, and I'm going to stop it right there because we're going to be coming up to a break in a minute. But do your homework. Go on YouTube and look up Ben Livingston. Just type in Ben Livingston or weather modification Ben Livingston, and you'll be surprised at what you find. All right, hour 1 up. Hour 2 coming up. Don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. Former Hitler Youth whistleblower, hour 2. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on today's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com. And I want to play what I was talking about in the first hour with the former Hitler Youth whistleblower. I'm going to play this. I want to give it as much time as I can because I've been wanting to air this to you guys for a while, and I just didn't have a chance. As I said, I've been super busy going over everything else, all the different shootings, or having a guest like Mark Passio on, or interviewing different people. By the way, I interviewed Doug Rocky the other day, so I'm going to have him on. I'll be airing that interview soon about DU, and it's going to be a multiple-part interview because I'm going to, in a couple weeks, I'm going to do another follow-up with him. But, it takes a lot out of him. But I was able to sit down with him, and we went over depleted uranium. And for the people that don't know who he is, you can look him up, but you'll see, you'll hear all about him and about what he went through and about depleted uranium and the dangers of it. And where it's been used, and you'll right from the horse's mouth, the man who was tasked to clean it up, and you'll hear that, and I'll be airing that within the next week or so. I just have to get, I have to get everything. I have to get a chance to sit down and clean up the volume levels and stuff because he's on a regular landline, and I use the call recorder, and as I've said before. Usually when people are on, you hear it. Usually if someone's on a landline, you can barely hear them. So what I like to do is go in and turn the volume levels up a little bit so you guys can hear it a lot clearer when it broadcasts. So I have to clean it up a little bit. But I'll have that all ready to go within the next week or so. I've just been swamped. So today I have a chance. I have the clean slate on Sunday. And I knew first hour I wanted to cover the RNC and the hurricane that's going on and the fact that, yes, they can control the weather. Just look up Ben Livingston so you can find out who he is and you can learn all about the reality of weaponized weather. It's a reality. Let's stop sticking our head in the sand and, oh, no, we can't control the weather. That's science fiction. No, it's a reality. They've been doing it since the 60s. It's time to grow up and wake up. And as you heard him say, they would fly in with these Hurricane Hunter aircraft and seed the clouds. So they already know that they can do it, and the planes were equipped to do it. So are they still equipped to do it today? 40 years later, what kind of newer technology do they have? So until we actually can get a look at it and the public gets to know what's going on, which there's no reason we shouldn't know. And people say, oh, well, it's better left to people that know better. What are you, stupid? You don't have the right to know that they're messing with the weather? It affects you. Dummy. So this is real. Not better left to people that know better. Most of these people don't know better. Remember, a lot of the times, and I'm not saying this is the case with Ben Livingston, but with some of these geoengineers and stuff, they have the same attitude that they did when they were playing with atomic weapons. At least here in the United States, when they were playing with, when they did the Trinity test, half the people involved in that thought they were going to ignite the atmosphere on fire, of the planet and burn all the atmosphere, but they did it anyway. So that kind of mentality is the same mentality these geoengineering morons have. Just think about that. All right. So anyway, I want to get to the former Hitler Youth whistleblower. And again, this is not me saying that I think secret Nazis are behind the scenes running everything. That's a straw man argument. That's not what I'm saying. I'm playing this, and I want you to listen to the audio and listen to what this man says, because it's very, very, very close. And when I say very, I mean like almost a mirror image of what's going on today. And you'll hear him talk about how the German society was, sucked into this, and how they got taken over pretty much by, how they were able to be taken over, I should say, and how people got sucked into it. And he was a former Hitler Youth. He fought for what he thought was his country until later on he realized that's not what was going on. You'll hear him say it. Instead of me sitting here bloviating about it, let me sit and play the clip for you so you can hear it right from the horse's mouth himself.
My name is Hilmar von Kampe. I am of German origin. I grew up under the Nazis. I was a member of the Hitler Youth, and I am a World War II veteran. I thought I was defending my country, and it was a terrible awakening after the war when I came home that I had not defended my fatherland, but I had done the dirty job which Hitler and the Nazis had selected for us. And I began to study to find out why and how this could happen. And what I found was that the Nazi state was built on lies. And the Nazi ideology and the Nazi philosophy were built on lies. And that Germany went down the drain was because of godlessness. Godlessness means that I do act contrary or a nation acts contrary against God's commandments, which are for everybody everywhere, whether you believe in God or not. And I have tried to formulate an answer so that what happened in Germany at that time did not happen here again. And it is very disturbing that, in my view, we are very close to the same end. And I shall, during this interview, try to make clear that it is not the actions which are different in every country, but the way to a totalitarian system, and the Nazi state was a totalitarian system, is also built on lies, and that the most important thing today is to define the role of God in human society. And I will explain all of this in this interview, I hope. I was 7 when the Nazis took over in January 30, 1933. For me, that didn't mean anything. But my parents, my father was what is here called, he was the head of a county. He was not as here, where you are elected, you were posted by the government. He was a civil servant. And he was asked to join the Nazi party. He refused, and he was immediately fired and was moved to, not fired from his job. They couldn't fire him entirely, and then he was sent to a corner on much less income than he had. And that was a typical way of Nazi behavior. If you don't do what they want, they liquidate you, or they make you impossible. So we only noticed that we would move from one city to the other. But saying from what I have learned then was that the Nazis' philosophy divided our family. There were the pro-Nazis and there was the no-Nazis against the Nazis, and my parents were under the no-Nazis. And the Nazis controlled all the media, which was only newspapers, radio, and film industry, and that was the way they indoctrinated the nation. And I was not aware of it. When I was in the Hitler Youth, I took it for granted that is the government, and there was no doubt in our mind as children. And for my parents, it was the most important worry all the time to have their children not being indoctrinated and taken over by the Nazi ideology. And our parents could not speak to us openly about what was happening in the country. because the Gestapo, that is the secret state police, wanted to get at the parents via the children who might give their parents up.
I'll stop it right there. Does that sound familiar? Those tactics sound familiar, ladies and gentlemen? Coming out of the break, I'll pick it right up. Don't go anywhere.
By the Nazi ideology. And our parents could not speak to us openly about what was happening in the country because the Gestapo, that is the secret state police, wanted to get at the parents via the children who might give their parents up, makes problems for them, since it are harmless and don't know what they are being asked. My father used to listen to a German-speaking radio station from Switzerland, Beromünster, late at night, so that we children might not see it. Otherwise, in the Hitler Youth, we didn't notice that we were being indoctrinated. Indoctrinated we were by the radios and by the news and by the school.
Did you hear what he just said? That's why I rewound it to that part. Did you hear what he just said? They were indoctrinated by the radio, the news, and the schools. Same thing that's going on today.
We got the German history being explained in Nazi terms. And for the Nazis and for Hitler especially, his strategy was to make that the big thing where people would follow him. And he was very successful, that very many people thought he would bring glory to Germany, that they were all fooled and lied to. What Hitler said was, you need no more than 10,000 people to control a nation of 80 million people. And he didn't need to make us Nazis because we were fighting his war, not defending our country. I thought I was defending Germany. And as I said earlier, it was a terrible awakening after the war. And I suppose I'll give you some more examples later on. Just as far as the war is concerned, my father said already in 1943 to my mother, and we got that from her, that you can't wish anymore that we win the war. So he knew exactly where that we were taken over by evil. But we children, I was very happy. I was always afraid that I would be late before and not be able to enter the army before we had won the war. So that was childish, but that is what I thought. When we were on a train, I was a gunner in a tank, where we called that assault artillery. It was a tank without a tower. There came the news from the attempt to kill Hitler in 1944, and then they gave a long list in the radio of names of generals and of people who were involved in that attempt. And I thought to myself, they were very good German names. And I said to myself, what a pity that they did not succeed. And that I remember distinctly, which means we didn't like the Nazis, but not so much on the ideology. It was we didn't like the people. They were impertinent. They thought they knew everything. They tried to teach you everything. And especially, they didn't like any they didn't want you to be, you couldn't dare to be of other opinion than they had, or you would have been in trouble. And we had, before our...
Does that sound familiar? People getting rounded up for their Facebook posts? Veterans getting harassed because of their interest in truth, and they say, hey, 9/11 doesn't look like it was on the official history books, and all they got to do is say, quote unquote, it was an inside job. Well, you get thrown in a mental institution. He just said if you didn't agree with it, that was a problem. Look what's going on today. See the mirror image?
church, we sometimes had the Gestapo, 2 Gestapo agents in front of the church and taking down our names, everybody's names, intimidation, because their purpose was to destroy religion and destroy Christianity. Well, Hitler is known as having said, I have it in my book, I think.
And by the way, why would they go after religion just like they do today? Because if they break down religion, it helps break down things that keep people together, like the destruction of the family as well. I've talked about this. Doesn't matter. I have my own thoughts on organized religion, as I've talked about. But if they get people to not believe in any sort of God or any sort of divine force, now obviously there is something that our souls, our energy comes from. To pretend what it is, I don't really know. But the people behind the scenes, as you could see, the Nazi Party was pushing an agenda that obviously was put. It came from somewhere, but it wasn't their own little original creation, and it's just suddenly popping up again. It's history repeating itself. So there's something more behind the scenes. Something more is going on. This isn't just we need to learn from the past so we don't relive it. Again, we need to evolve. I'll quit interrupting it.
That he will wait some years and then he will destroy the churches and the Christians. That was his purpose. And I come to the reasoning later on. So he created a group which is called the German Christians, who produced Christian teaching, who produced Nazi philosophy in religious language. So people dumb enough followed that, thought that's very good. So he tried to get the Christians on the side of the Nazis. We were told in the Hitler Youth, but even more so in the schools, that they told us, you can play and sing hymns as much as you like in your homes or in your churches, but in society it is us, the National Socialists, who are in charge, and we determine what is going to happen or what is not going to happen. They had realized, like the Soviet, that a higher authority above the government would be an obstacle to their power plans. So they wanted to get God out of society and the Nazis in. And if I look at the United States of America, that is exactly what the ACLU is propagating. They are even these people, these godless people, are even trying to eliminate a reference to God on the casket of the graves of our soldiers. They did exactly. They have been greatly successful in taking God out of society, out of education, and creating, especially under young people, a complete lack of understanding of what the world is like and what has to be done about it. And I say that, first of all, that the Nazis are not fascists, they are socialists. And as socialists, they come from the same fruit as communism and socialism. And I would say today, the American Congress, House and Senators, and White House, they are closer to the Nazis than they are to our founding fathers.
And that's right from the mouth of a former Hitler Youth. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break. Don't go anywhere. More when we come back. Again, to give this optimum time, when we come back in from the break, I'm just going to start the clip, so stay tuned.
And creating, especially under young people, a complete lack of understanding of what the world is like and what has to be done about it. And I say that, first of all, that the Nazis are not fascists, they are socialists. And as socialists, they come from the same fruit as communism and socialism. And I would say today, the American Congress, House and Senators, and White House, they are closer to the Nazis than they are to our founding fathers. And I cannot understand how the American people can tolerate a thing like this. And I have more examples. The Nazis killed 7 million or 6 million Jews in their concentration camps and 10 million more of others. We kill in our so-called free society, and that is the same in all of Western civilization. We are killing here 50 million unborn human beings, and that we are being represented as a nation by a group of people who tolerate.
He's talking about eugenics and eugenist, Planned Parenthood, Bill Gates. What Pastor Childress has talked about, the Negro Project. Over 51% of the black population was never born because of Planned Parenthood. Margaret Sanger, eugenicists, which, again, the Nazis took by the way, the Nazi Party, Hitler mimicked a lot of their the eugenics programs and stuff that the Nazi Party experimented with and took part in. They took a lot of their standards from the United States, because we already had this before them. Yeah, they took notes from here. So again, history that you're not taught.
Right. This immorality, I don't have any words for this, that is being tolerated. And I think there is a in the Declaration of Independence, in the second paragraph, it states that the government is formed to defend the life, happiness, and of their people according to the demands of the Constitution. And if they do not do that, if they try to liquidate the Constitution, they should be removed by the people, and other people should be put into government who are committed to the reality of our Constitution, and I am on their side. The world consists of people, and all people, whatever their race is, whatever their religion is, whatever their color is, they have the same human nature. And inside of every person, there is the voice of God, and there is the voice of Satan, of the devil. And following the law of, I don't know how you would take it, following the voice of the lie within yourself leads to disaster in the personal and in the national life. And our founding father.
He's talking about, what he's addressing is what I've talked about, where if you, like what Mark and I were talking about on Friday, you put garbage in, you get garbage out. As above, so below. The law of correspondence. You see how, I mean, this is a former Hitler youth. This guy, he's got to be in his 80s or maybe even older. He's sitting here telling you what he's learned from his life experiences. Very interesting how it correlates, dovetails in with a lot of things that I've talked about and other people have talked about. And he's explaining how being detached, he references it as godlessness. And obviously he's a Christian, so that's how he references it. But it's this universal law that Mark and I were talking about. This, this place wherever our soul comes from, that creative force, whatever it may be, whatever you want to call it. And he's saying, the first thing they did was they needed to detach people from even believing in that. And how many people today believe that we're just sacks of flesh that walk around and that's it? There's nothing, and after we die, we're dead, and there's nothing after this. People have been detached. That's why people are so easily controlled. I've gone into this hundreds of times. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I just wanted to point out that that's That's what he means. Because I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, I don't believe in God or, organized religion. That's what he's referencing, okay? He's in his eyes, the way he looks at it, it's Christianity. But that's what he's referencing is this deeper creative force. You could hear in the words coming out of his mouth that it's a much deeper meaning to it.
Were very much aware when they wrote the Constitution that they had to produce something which made it very difficult to take over from outside or from inside. And and I think there is a statistics about how many of what is in the Constitution comes from the Bible. And I have a whole package of literature about the founding fathers and their convictions that in order that people can be free, they have to have God in their lives and in their nation. And the Ten Commandments and the moral integritance which the founding fathers used for the Constitution makes it is only possible that it's being held and that people are free if they listen to the voice of God inside and follow his commandments. The Nazis threw God and his commandments out of any area of decision. Godless people determined what is to be done. And here it is now the same. Obama is being idolized in the schools. That is what Hitler did. Hitler went after the World War veterans. These people ran after the people who want money from the government. And that is not a basis for no nation. It is on the greatness of America. It's their commitment to truth.
Do you understand what he just said? He just said that Adolf Hitler went after the World War I veterans in Germany, and that's exactly the same thing that's going on today. You see again another mirror image. Do you understand how they're trying to pull, no matter what God you believe in this case, he's referencing again Christianity, but no matter what God you believe in or whatever your spiritual beliefs are, they are trying, the powers that shouldn't be, the controllers, are trying to separate you from that. They're trying to separate you from humanity, and they're trying to separate you from that greater force, whatever it is. And that's how they control you, because once you're separated, you feel alone. You feel like nobody understands you. And you're more easily manipulated because sometimes you emanate fear. It all dovetails together.
And doing this, that it became the richest nation on earth. And now they come on here and want to have a part of it for doing nothing. One has to remember, or one has to know, that everything what happens is about power. With other words, it is the power of God against the power of man. God wants us to be free. Man wants to control each other. And everything what we now experience here in this country, that has, it were other things or other themes, but the motivation is always the same. It is power for us. So all this discussion, and it is not, the issue is not capitalism versus communism or socialism. Socialism and communism are consequences of immorality of those who guide their philosophy then, and the people and the nations who they have under them. They want to control. So everything you hear now, especially with the health, what is it called, the health program, where they want to put the government in charge, they have nothing to do with the medicine or with better serving of healing people as the doctors and the hospitals have.
He's talking about Obamacare. We're going to break. We'll be right back.
You hear now especially with the health, the health program, where they want to put the government in charge. They have nothing to do with the medicine or with better serving of healing people, as the doctors and the hospitals have to do. They want to control what is the heart of the lives of the people, so that they decide and make the people dependent on them. So I repeat, it is not a battle between communism and capitalism, even though the consequence of the philosophy of the founding fathers made us the richest nation on earth. The issue is not, I repeat it, capitalism versus socialism. It is God versus man. It is good versus evil. And it is God against godlessness. And since I have experienced godlessness in Germany and see the destruction of my family, the destruction of the nation, and then I see the same forces at work here, I shudder that people don't notice it. And our Congress people in Congress, we don't want any bilateral or bipartisan decisions. We want that Obama and the Democrats are being stopped with what the destruction of America, which they have embarked upon. We had a nation, and I said it earlier, which was just 20 years about, not even 15 years after World War I, which we had lost. And the Treaty of Versailles was not a peace treaty, it was a treaty to enrich themselves for the others on German expense. And we had an inflation, which is coming here, may come also, this way, where you need $1 to change it into German marks. Would you have to pay $1 million, $2 million, $10 million marks for $1? And my mother, when she came, my father was paid, and my mother got there twice a day. My mother got there with a suitcase, and then the paper money was put into that suitcase, and then she ran into the city, not to buy what she wanted, but to see what she could get for those, with this money she had, and that day for day. And I don't understand until today how people could live by that, and I shudder if the thought that people have the same here. That is the one side. And Hitler, very well aware of the mentality of the German people, we had also about, I think, 6 million unemployed. He went after the veterans. And you can say that the German nation marched we say in German, Gleichschritt. That means we have the same step into disaster. We knew that you can't be in opposition to the Nazi. That we knew. And the elder you were, the more you realized. I was 18 when I got into the army, and I was fully aware what I was doing. I didn't realize that I was already brainwashed, and I had and when I get to Germany and tell the people what is happening here, they don't believe me. They just don't believe me that any nation can be so dumb and go after the same immorality as under the Nazis. I heard many speeches. I didn't hear, or I didn't see ever Hitler, but I heard the Nazis speaking. I heard in the school we had a teacher, when he spoke of God, he made jokes about God and where you put your rope into it, and then he laughed, and everybody laughed, found that comical, but we didn't know what he was laughing about. But you got those things where you realized that you could not say everything you wanted. And only afterwards you realize what effort the Nazis made to eliminate any opposite voice in the nation. It's like what they're doing here, trying to make a a law at the back of the people where they want to finish you, for instance, because you speak and work for the truth, and they don't want that. And they want to keep their lie, keep the lie. And the lie is not different on what the Nazis told us, and you can see afterwards how true it was to say that they are liars. I repeat, we got always the Nazi philosophy in very many aspects where we don't recognize them. I have in the Hitler Youth in 2 small cities, I have never consciously experienced that I'm being brainwashed. But I was brainwashed, assuming that a totalitarian system and a leader like Hitler can bring us to freedom and peace. Never occurred to me. That was a state, that was a government, that was our army, and that is, we are Germans, so we for Germans. Each person has to look for information which he believes could be honest. Because what the newspapers say, most of them, the so-called mainline newspapers, or the politicians, it's all built on lies. It's not so easy to find out how wrong they are. You have to judge them by their actions. The whole education system here is wrong. It's not in the Constitution that the federal government should run the education. It's a matter of the states of the Union. But the Nazis in school had Darwinism, the evolution theory, which is against God and his creation. It's the same here. So how on earth can the children know what is right and wrong? It is the parents who don't fight. It's not. Of course, it's the people who seduce these children, but the responsibility is with the parents, and the families are being destroyed by the same immorality of which the left is throwing out at all sides. How can the children know what is right and wrong? I don't know how many million divorced families there are, and people who grow up without father or without mother because they can't live with each other. That has to be cured. That is a way to make it impossible to be taken over. I hope I made that clear. Mm-hmm. That makes it, I fight that battle, and if the Christians stand up, they would change and really fight for what is right and not for what is wrong. I think we could change the situation fast. The Führer, that is Hitler, said so and so, and then everyone had here, hooray, and they did it. And the Nazi functionaries, they didn't think for themselves, and they were very small-minded. They thought they knew all the answers, and they told people what they should do. And there were very few people who dared not to do what they were being told. As you say, there was no definition for what the rights are, what the society is based upon, on the German working like nobody else. It was all pro-German and had always a sense that we are better than the others. And a lot of people fell for it. Here in America, the wrong is first of all being promoted as a virtue. But it is the road to a totalitarian system, because a totalitarian system is an abandonment of God's commandments. And where men can only, those who do that, they can only rule if they control everybody. And if you have no moral standards, then you can't judge. If you don't have moral standards, a Christian has to live by the moral standards and not by the expectation of heaven. Because if you follow the moral standards of God, your way will be all right, and you will recognize who is against it, and then
I'm going to stop it right there because we're coming up to the end of the broadcast for today. You can see the whole clip, the whole film, actually, the whole interview. It's about an hour long. Former Hitler Youth whistleblower warns of America's Nazi future is what it's titled. Federal Jack Tube and the number 4, all one word, Federal Jack Tube and the number 4. That's the YouTube channel. I dropped the link in the chat room, and I will put a link to the video in the description when I upload the archive to YouTube. I want to thank everybody for listening today. The gentleman's name is Hilmer von Campe. Hilmer von Campe. You heard right from him, right from the horse's mouth, where we're headed. And remember, again, he used Christianity as his example because that's what he's based in, but it's separating you from everything and everyone. Getting you cornered, and then the only thing that you can base your judgments off of is what you're told by the quote-unquote powers that shouldn't be, the controllers. Ladies and gentlemen, I love you all. I helped open your eyes today. I'll see you all again Wednesday. I'm out.